Hi dancers, it's Kirsten. Welcome back to the Confident Dancer YouTube channel. I have truly such a treat for you today. You don't even know. This is going to be an interview with Melody Mennite, who is a former principal dancer with the Houston Ballet. I have personally looked up to Melody and her incredible artistry since I was about 14 years old. I've been watching her performances when I was in the academy at Houston Ballet training there. I got to see just the way she would rehearse and perform, and I just knew from watching her from a distance that she was an incredible dancer and an incredible person, and that is confirmed through the interactions I've gotten to have with her recently. She, in June, had one of her final performances, or her final performance with Houston Ballet. She retired after an incredible 23-season career there, and would you believe, she is not done. She is not done dancing. She is now performing with Vitacca Ballet, a contemporary ballet company in Houston, Texas, and she has so many incredible freelance projects that she's also working on. So she is not done. She's got an exciting second wind in her career up ahead, and in addition to being such an incredible dancer, you will see for yourself. She has such a big heart and an incredible mind, and she has so many ideas that are really, really valuable, I think, for all dancers to hear. So I will not go on more. I will have you listen to this episode for yourself. Please give us some love in the comments. Let us know what you think, and enjoy. I don't know why. When I get excited, my left eye creates a tear. Does yours do that?
I do the same thing, and often it'll happen like before a show, and
Yes.
I'll right after I put my eyelash on, and so all the makeup that's on this is just like melting off because it just like waters just a little bit, and it like
Okay.
I have that too. That's really weird. I've never heard anyone
I
say that.
want to know what is up with that. Also, TMI, but my left armpit does the same thing. There's something on the left side of my body.
I also have an uneven smell ratio.
Oh my gosh.
When I get like stress sweats or like stress BO would be better, like a better way to describe it. It's always one side. And I think it's probably the left too. But it's like nothing, don't go there.
Oh my gosh.
That's fun.
Honestly, do you care if this is the intro to the video?
No,
Because I kind of love it.
it's very appropriate.
Perfect. Well, we're here. We're here. I just love, again, I told you this at your retirement party, I think, but the little 14-year-old inside of me who's like obsessed with ballet and went to see you dance. I think I tried to go see you perform Marie. I ended up seeing Sarah Webb do it. She was amazing. But I saw you do Carousel when I was like 14 or 15, and I was just like, she's a star. And so being here with you now is just like such a full circle moment. It's so sweet. So thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So before we kind of do the classic interview thing where we rewind and talk about your origin story, your background, I'd love to actually talk about your final performance weekend. What was that like? It seemed so like such a mix of huge emotions. So can you just kind of talk us through what that last weekend of performances was like?
Yeah, talk about a mix of huge emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I feel things really in like really big ways anyways. Like I feel like I have big feelings and they're like that's just me. And so obviously anyone, whether your range is like more like gentle kind of feeling waves or like big feeling waves, in this situation anyone would have been having probably like a lot of big mixed.
Seriously.
um, so I was grateful that I was actually really, really busy already with work outside of Houston Ballet too. I was filming a
Mm.
TV show in New York. So by that time, I was flying back and forth. So I was like doing the shows because we do 4 weekends back to back. The way that Houston Ballet would do things is that they would do 2 weekends of like full length ballet and then 2 weekends of a mixtra. So that's how the season wrapped up. So I was like back and forth, and I had set a ballet in California one week and then come back and done shows. So that was good for me a little bit because it gave me a little bit of a distraction, and I had to throw my focus other places. So I didn't just get to like wallow all at once and sit into like the reality of
Wow.
this career in that company of 22 or 23 years, however long I was there, ending. And oh my God, so much like the loss of that community who is my family. And but then all of the like beautiful like experiences that I've had there and all the things I've performed and like those thoughts and even the things that I was performing the last few weekends there. Dwight Rhoden came for the first time to
That
Houston.
one was so good. I wanted to talk about the lightning round. I just felt like it was the perfect symbolic piece to your ending and 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it was really like it really was perfect. I got to have a first with someone who Dwight created such just a piece about human experience and like what it's like to feel like the drive and the pressure of life, but then have all of these things in the background of like connection and miscommunication and like a goal that you like fight towards. And when he would explain every section and then choreograph it, like there's just so much energy and so much like what did I keep like thinking about it, like everyone was focused on the same goal. So there's this momentum of like the collective of dancers in that piece, like all
and
just
I
like,
could feel it. The
yeah,
intensity, the athleticism.
it was so hard. But
I
yeah,
know, man.
it felt like for me, it felt like the perfect way to wrap up my time with Houston Ballet. And I also am segueing still as a dancer, still in like active in my dancing career, but now into a contemporary ballet company where we're doing work that is like that meld and that blend of classical ballet, but with that energy and just it's just different than
Yeah.
we're not going to do a lot of full length ballets. We do Nutcracker, but yeah, it felt like the perfect little like bow and segue. And he was so kind and gave me so many just like words that I would go and write down in the dressing room and be like, I can't believe that this like icon in ballet just said that to me about their appreciation of my work and how I interpret their work. And it's just like everything I needed in that moment from him, from the piece, from what it created for me and the other dancers, and then what we got to stage for the audience. Like it was a really beautiful way to end my time there. And then of course it was also incredibly bittersweet to have an ending there. Because I don't think I ever had like imagined what that would really look like. A lot of times people kind of get like folded in or they go away in a certain way, but like talk about non-traditional. My exit is like extraordinarily non-traditional to have like such a long career in a classical company and then continue my dancing career in a different kind of company that's smaller in the same town. Like just I was just like, wow, this is not exactly how I pictured this going down.
Wow.
But it was really beautiful. And then of course like also really sad in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I'm still feeling the fallout of
Of
a lot of
course.
things. I miss what was my home for so long in my entire adult life. But
Yeah, actually.
yeah, but even finding a new home, like I've been so embraced by the dancers at Vitacca, and they're amazing and they're amazing people and they've been so kind and so inspiring. And I think it's good and healthy to also like have a variety of experiences and environments in dance. And so
Yes.
I'm really, really grateful for it, all at
Yeah.
the same time. It's a lot. I mean, I don't even know if I answered your question, but it was like
Oh, of course. Yeah.
everything all at once.
Yeah, seriously. How far in advance did you know that you were going to transition from Houston Ballet and retire from that company?
Yeah. I knew for about, I guess, almost a year and a half. Like so
Okay.
a year and 5 months. Um, Stanton told me that he wasn't going to be offering me a contract after the next season. And so
Wow.
I was like, oh shit. Sorry.
Oh, it's
You might
okay.
cut out. It took me, I feel like it took me, actually, it like didn't really hit me that it was real until maybe like 5 months before the last show. So like I think
Mm.
I was going through all sorts of stages of like grief, like the
Yeah.
denial of like it's really happening. We're bringing in a new kind of like, you know, we brought in Julie.
Yeah.
Like literally the conversation all happened in the same day, so she hadn't even started yet. So then in my mind I was like, well, but what if she gets here and she wants me to keep dancing? And so I
Yes.
had so many thoughts and so many processes,
Mm.
and then it became very clear to me that I wasn't done dancing, and that
Yeah.
that wasn't my choice of timing. And it wasn't even said like, the conversation wasn't about retiring. So it's not like we were talking about my retirement. So that also
Mhm.
felt kind of like a rug pulled out from underneath me.
Wow.
And so then I was like, okay, so now I have to build my own retirement, which in a way is kind of a gift, right? Because I think
Yeah.
a lot of times principal ballerinas that are in big companies kind of get their retirements decided for them. Maybe not always, but I think a lot of times it kind of can be like, so when do you want to do this? But I never had that conversation. And so I was like, well, I have to just think about this all myself now. And what do I want to do? And what comes next? And so it was clear to me I wanted to keep dancing. I feel really strong and really good. And it's like, I've gotten to this point where I feel so like I have so much to give back, and I'm finally so comfortable. Like I like don't ever get nervous to go on stage. I get excited, but there's
Wow.
it's like settling in that it's like it is a confidence, in my
Mhm.
work and my experience, which happens over should happen over time, hopefully, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so what happened in that year and a half is that I sort of was like, I mean, I was like auditioning. I thought about maybe segueing to like Broadway. I was like, well, I don't have to keep dancing in a ballet company. I really knew right away that that was actually not going to be the right path for me. I didn't
Mhm.
want to just shift to another big ballet company, because I was like, what I want in a shift like this is to experience a very different environment, because that will teach me a lot about being a leader. It'll teach me a lot about being a dancer in a very different place than I've been in the same place since I was 16. Um, so I was like, I don't want it to just be big ballet company, another ballet company. Although I did
Yeah.
audition for some ballet companies, but I was like, I never was like, yes. I was kind of like, no, I don't think I want to do this again.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. And what was cool about that process is I got to meet a lot of people. I got to have a lot of different experiences, even in like the job search process and building my resume and looking at all my footage that I could
Mm.
find on the internet and being like, oh my God, I did that and I did that. And it's like, you don't slow down sometimes when you're in it to like really sit back and be like, holy crap. Like, at least for me, I feel like each moment that we get to be on stage is achieving a dream. Like if you love dance,
Mhm.
just been that kid that's like, I just love dancing and I want to do this no matter what, then it's not even about like the resume. It's about every single moment. And a lot of times, as soon as the moment's done, I don't know, we do this thing, or at least I did this thing where you're just like on to the next. And you're not like, oh my God, that was a dream come true. And that was
Yes.
come true. And that was a dream come true, like every single time. So that like, I think it shifted my perspective into that too, as I started like digesting, sitting back and going, oh, this is what I've done that I can show people, and that informs now what I want to keep doing. And I just never had the energy or space or
Wow.
time to like sit back and do that
Wow.
out my own career.
What a wild experience to have that amount of time to be able to explore different paths. And it really sounds like this is a rebirth in some ways. And you get to like have the space to decide how you want to move forward, what do you want to leave behind, what new things do you want to explore, how do you want to grow, what do you want to give, things like that. Though this does sound so hard. And I thought of Wendy Whalen. When you were talking, I watched the film Restless Creature years ago, and that spoke to me in so many ways because I was going through a pretty severe injury at the time that caused me to leave company life. And she talked about how, I mean, clearly she loves dance and was like made to dance.
Yeah.
And yet she had that quote that I continually paraphrase, so I need to go find the direct quote. But it was like, at the end of the day, you just have to realize that dance can never give back to you all that you put into it. And it sounded sad. It sounded sad and dismal. I don't think that's really what she meant, but it really snapped things into view for me that, yeah, Wendy Whalen also had this experience of like, that role isn't for you anymore. And yet she's this icon, and she evolved and went into her own path that's also been beautiful and inspiring. And it just, yeah, seeing or witnessing the end of someone's really iconic career and how it can still end in ways that maybe you wouldn't have, I don't know if you would have chosen that for yourself initially.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've used it as
Yeah.
a opportunity. It seems like you've really made it a beautiful thing, but
I mean,
such
no,
a crazy career and how it ends or redefines.
so that makes me think about, though, like that, even that quote, and it depends on what you think of dance as, right? So it depends on how you're framing what is dance able to give back to me. And the reality is that in many companies, and I can really mostly speak to big classical ballet companies, there are gatekeepers, right? There are gatekeepers of whether you still fit that role or not, whether the directors, whether I want to see you do that role anymore or not. And once that doesn't align anymore, for whatever reason, it can be age, it can be a change of like preference on their part,
Mhm.
you know, like, well, now I kind of want to see a young person do it, or now I want it to be a dark-haired person, or whatever.
Yeah.
And when singular opinions hold that much power over people's careers, I kind of feel like the like traditional ballet mindset, I think we do ourselves a disservice by not continuing to, as women, and as I'm a woman who's older in my field, not continuing to like fight for the opportunities that we may still want. And that's one thing that I became very aware of in this time, is that wasn't modeled for me. As I've been in my career, I didn't see women that were in their late 30s at the end of their careers. If they were able to continue, it was because their directors decided that they could. But it wasn't because they went through something where that director said, well, I don't feel it anymore. You're not right for that role anymore, whatever that is. And they said, okay, I respect that is your vision and this company is about your vision, but I still have a lot to give, and I want dance to give back to me in this way. So I'm going to go and seek out my own opportunities. That's called agency.
I love it.
The word.
This is what I want to see more of in the ballet world.
Is agency. And it was hard. Like for me, it was very, very hard to even believe that I could have that or find it. And so it felt like at times like humiliating. It felt at times like, are people going to think I'm just a crazy person for showing up and asking for this or looking for this? And it felt like trailblazing. Like it felt like I'm like, I don't know. Please come out of the woodwork. If anybody sees this and you're like, I did that. But like what I kept imagining actually is that many, many women stood in the place that I was standing in at this like crossroads and just didn't see options.
Yes.
And maybe had a desire. And we're talking about America as well, because in Europe, people dance for forever and have like lifetime
contracts and also paid vacations.
That's a whole other conversation that I'm sure has its own. If you've experienced that, you can talk about that, and you can talk about what's not great about that. You know, I've heard a lot about that. but that's not what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
And so in this country, and so I wondered how many women had felt like, I even said, I don't want to keep doing this at this level forever. Like I'm not delusional, and I've never wanted to like keep going and like hobbling around and like trying to force myself into something, but that's
Yeah.
definitely not where I'm at right now. And so I wondered how many people before me and now felt like that, and maybe just accepted, that sort of like thing that we're taught as dancers from a young age, of just sort of like, what is that word where you just like go along? Compliance, right?
Yeah.
Like compliance is so valued in ballet,
Mhm.
because it is really intense training, and you do need people who know it very well to teach it to you as you're coming up. But there's a point where you're a grown up and this is your life and this is
Yes.
your career that you've given your whole life to. And if you want to do something, it shouldn't just be one singular human's opinion that causes you to lose all of that if you're not ready to.
I don't know much about NFTs or if videos could be NFTs, but if that video clip could be captured, kept, and sold for $500 million, I think it should be.
I could get some of that. That would be very helpful.
And you should get all of it. You should get all of it. Yes. Wow. I completely agree and resonate with that, that there's this, I think there's an invitation for more dancers to recognize that whether or not this model of someone else's opinion dictating your career, whether or not that changes outside of yourself, maybe there are ways where you can start to explore your own autonomy, maybe first over your own mind, the way you see yourself, how your mind creates your experience, then maybe what opportunities you advocate for or explore. Just, maybe there's more freedom and autonomy available to us that we kind of have to create or go pursue. Like maybe no one's going to be like, do you want this autonomy over your life in classical ballet? But I just love how you're modeling that and introducing this idea.
Well, thanks. And I guess as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, you want to know what? Like, I don't know that I've seen it in this little classical ballet, big company bubble, being a principal dancer, whatever. But I have seen, and we're impacted by everything, right? Like, I have seen women who have become freelancers, especially like I know too that like off the top of my head that I've been close with, that I've been given choreographic opportunity and dancing opportunity by them. They're younger than me, but Silk and Kelly and Emily Speed have both. Emily's just started in the producing realm, but she produced a festival in New York City this summer that like I had taken agency and commissioned a pas de deux for myself from my friend Jack Wolf. And we've been able to perform it everywhere because I had that moment of, I want to own my own work for me to perform.
Yes.
And then there was the opportunity, but I've seen women who are in like a more of a freelance setting creating opportunities for themselves. So I'm sure that I've been inspired by that.
Yes.
Just sort of like I think breaking out of that little box that we keep ourselves in classical ballet, where we're like, but nothing is like this, and nothing really is, but there's a lot more out here.
Yeah.
Really high quality dance and art and all the things that make what we love about dance exist is not just existing in a few big ballet companies. And I think it's important for dancers to remember that and like remind themselves of that. I do think what you give up is some security and some like stability of just kind of practical things, health benefits and like a nicer paycheck and things like that. And those matter for sure. And that's something like systemically that maybe we should over time address and see change. But yeah. Oh my gosh. Obviously, I've had a lot of time to think about this.
I mean, it seems like you've only had, well, you have so much more time to think. So I cannot wait to check in with you in a couple of years and see how your mentality has shifted, what perspectives you bring after like multiple years of freelancing and paving your own way. This is just so exhilarating and exciting to be able to witness and talk to you about. And yeah, duh. I'm getting so excited. I would love to rewind and actually hear more about your early career and especially your childhood. I know you've shared on Instagram about coming from a family of artists and how you do more than just dance. You're a very beautiful singer. I've heard you sing in some of your Instagram videos. And so I would just love to hear more about your just early years and how that maybe up until your early career. Let's start there if you don't mind giving us a little overview.
Yeah. So I'm from California. Santa Cruz is like a Bay Area small town where everybody is like surfer skater. Like that's like my friends did that, and I was a ballerina. But I am first generation Italian American, and so my dad is from southern Italy and his whole family, and that's the family that I grew up around over there. My mother is from here, but her family lives in a different part of the country, and so I didn't see them very much growing up. But I grew up like in this big Italian, like tight-knit family that spoke Italian, the dialect that they speak in Calabria, in their part of it. So ballet in that family of origin setting was very foreign and very like, I mean, they're from a very rural and much, much more poor part of Italy. So I did this interview with my dad because I've done school kind of all along throughout my career. And so my first research paper in a history class, I decided to interview my dad and do research on immigration during the time period from Italy to the United States that like a lot of people made that jump in the 70s at that time. There were a couple different times, but yeah, I found out a lot more than I knew that my dad had never seen a toilet until he came here when he was 15 years old.
Oh my gosh.
They didn't have running water, they didn't have plumbing, they didn't have electricity. It's very, very like I'm trying to use the word rural, but like they lived off the land. It was just totally different world.
Mhm.
And then they come here and then they have me. And so ballet, I have so often felt like such a misfit when it comes to the culture that surrounds ballet, because I'm like, even though I'm not from that, genetically and culturally, I'm just like barely removed from something so different from like a upper echelon kind of bougie ballet
Seriously.
experience, which I think has kept me very grounded and very curious to see what I see, because I bring a really different perspective of like life and what people do in life. But yeah, so I grew up with lots and lots of music as far as the artistry goes, because my family was constantly playing music. Every time we got together, there were guitars, harmonicas, singing,
My
like
heart. That is so sweet.
yeah, and my mother's a musician too. So I grew up watching, I mean, my parents played music on the weekends. My dad was in multiple bands throughout my life growing up. My mom sang at weddings. Like they taught me musical instruments. I also took piano. I sang on stage and played instruments on stage long before I ever did a ballet step on a stage.
Wow.
So my family was, as far as art is concerned, it was music.
Mhm.
And then dancing, just like wiggling, like it wasn't no formal dancing. So then I got into ballet, and they would, start coming to see the Nutcracker in some shows, and it was just like I said, it was such a different world to them. Like it is such a strange thing to have this whole production and sets and costumes and the separation from the audience. And I think I really had like beginner's mind because I had this perspective of my family. So yeah, I think they thought I was like kind of a weirdo, and they were like, "What are you doing?" But then I grew up with very different worlds, right? When I was at ballet, I was with my ballet friends most of my most of my friends were from very different types of families than I came from. There were a couple people who were from like more humble, like means and background, but not many. Like we were definitely the minority in that school. And I think that was really good for me because I kind of got to like really experience different types of people and subcultures, as I was growing up. And yeah, and I mean, I started coming to Houston Ballet Academy for summer programs because that was the best scholarship I got. I did get scholarships to a few of the big schools, but like Houston Ballets was always just like a quarter more, right? So I think the first year was half, and then it was a full, and then it was like a full plus. Like they just kept upping it, and it kept beating
Nice.
the other scholarships that I was getting. So it was like, that's where she's going. And I liked it here. So I kept coming here and ended up here, but yeah, it still is like there was a lot of my parents being like, when are you gonna be done with that? like is that, and a lot of the like, not from them necessarily, but I experienced a lot of like, but what do you actually do? Like and that's pretty normal for people who maybe don't know that you can have a career
Yeah.
as a dancer. So yeah, I mean, that's part of my upbringing. It feels like an important part that
Yeah.
I don't talk about a lot.
Mhm.
And I think our context, and like we talk about diversity a lot now, and diversity and inclusion isn't just about skin tone or what
Absolutely.
I call race, like there's so much diversity of background and experience and family, and like what do you go home to at the end of every day that you practice. And so I appreciate when I get to talk about some of my experience, which felt really outside of a lot of the groups that I have always danced with. And that plays a part in your feeling of
Yeah.
like that you belong somewhere or not.
I can tell that as an artist, you're different. I know I've told you this before. I can tell that you bring a humanity and a groundedness to what you do. And it's incredible that that can translate from, I mean, I've watched your performances from the nosebleeds, big, the terrifying balcony at the Wortham Theater,
Oh,
where I feel like I'm
scary.
going to lose my life every time I have a center seat and I'm in my little heels
Yeah,
trying to like,
trip.
don't
Don't
sit in
trip.
the, oh my gosh. But even from way up there, seeing your performances, I can tell that your acting is coming from not this place of just pretending, but you're accessing something that's really human and really real and even down to earth, if I could just, say all those things. And it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful, especially since ballet can be such a almost unrelatable art form in many ways, classical ballet. There's something that you bring to it in all of your roles that I've noticed sets you apart. And so I'm not surprised to hear that you had a unique life experience and origin story like that. So it's inspiring. I'd also love to hear more about how having your son early on shaped your career and your artistry.
Yeah. So as if I didn't already feel like the odd one out of the group, I also am gonna become like a teen mother and then go through my entire, career as a principal. Well, even before, as a
Yeah.
soloist and as a principal, as a mother, but then my entire journey as a principal as a single mother.
Mm.
Well, which I did get remarried at some point, and am not married anymore, but did acquire like a good friend through that marriage. Like we're like besties. So that was helpful. But I will say, like, being a single mom is no joke, and being a single mom who is in a very disciplined art form that has very, very
Wow.
rigid high expectations is also
Yeah.
no joke. But yeah, it definitely like did a 180 for my mindset. I was so young that I really hadn't established much of a pattern. I was getting a lot of opportunity in the company, like immediately from like the moment I got in the company. I was really fortunate. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, and so I was already dancing like solo roles and like doing a lot of stuff that also was not always great socially because a lot of people were like, "Who the F is that?" And like, why, why is she
Ugh.
getting it? I don't know, and I can't speak to what that's about. I just feel fortunate
Yeah.
that um, but having my son when I had him, so I knew that I wanted to be a mom for a really long time. I started babysitting when I was 10, which is
Oh
crazy
my
to me.
gosh.
What? Like what? I was so small. Like, I don't know. I babysat like a family of 3 that grew as like I babysat them. I don't know. So I
Wow.
always had this little like mom part of me that like learned how to nurture and take care and loved that from like really
Mhm.
early on. And I'm an only child, so I think I also really like relished getting to like have younger kids around me and take care of them and play with
Mm.
them. So I was really excited to be a mom, even though I was like super young and not sure how it would affect my career. Um, and I didn't want, once I had Isaac, is my son's name. Once I had Isaac, I didn't want to come back to dancing. I think, I had this like, again, this very kind of like different experience outside. So then once I like was away from it and then had this little baby, and I was like, this is the most important thing. Like, I don't need to be going and spending 9 hours away from him every day. Like, no. But out of necessity, like I needed to keep working.
Mhm.
And we have bills to pay and all of that. And so I ended up going back and being like, well, I'll just kind of figure this out as I go along. And I do remember a moment before I went back where I was like, well, if I have to spend this much time away from someone this precious and away from like what I feel like I should be with him so much more than I can be because of this, then I'm going to make it count. And I like it like, oh, that makes me want to cry.
It
It
is
like,
so sweet.
yeah, it really shifted my butt into like a new gear of like, I wanted to make him proud. I wanted to
Hmm.
like every second away from him, like needed to not be bullshit. It needed to be
Yeah.
my best because I was living out a dream, but I was paying a big price to be there every second. And
Melody, I'm tearing up.
sorry.
No, no, we do not apologize for tears.
Okay.
That
Um,
is so sweet.
yeah, it was, and so it was very motivating for me, and it was also very painful, because a big part of me didn't want to have to spend all that time away from him. And I think that
Mhm.
manifested in my career in some different ways. It was very motivating, but sometimes I felt resentful of how demanding of our time and our focus and our energy that place could be. So anytime we were just kind of like what felt like wasting time in the studio, or if we had like finished what we set out to accomplish and the clock is still going, and it sort of was like the vibe of like, well, you're still on the clock and you're still getting paid, so we'll blah blah blah. That was angering to me because I
Yeah.
had something more important at home and who needed me. And so that was new for me because I never felt that way before I had that dynamic. It was like,
Yeah.
whatever, we'll just stay and play and hang out in the studio afterwards, and we'll all hang out all the time. And that shifted something hugely for me where I was aware of wanting my time to be valued and useful.
Mm.
And when
Yeah.
it wasn't, I didn't feel good about that anymore. And most of that was internal for me, but I'm sure it showed in some ways. Like I'm sure it played a part. And again, kind of made me a little different in how
Hmm.
I like responded to some things.
Yeah.
So
That
yeah,
totally makes sense. So you were already in the company when you had Isaac, is that right?
yeah, for 2 years.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And so actually, I'd love to know once you did have Isaac, because I've talked to a few ballerina moms, and it seems like there's this shared experience or common experience of having this really renewed sense of purpose and like this fire in you of like, I'm going to dance for a purpose. I'm going to make this count. I'm going to do it for my child and not just for me or maybe like what the director thinks. How did you perceive that like your mentality or your priorities were different compared to some of your colleagues at the time without children?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, like this is hard to say, but I think that for a long time, I actually turned that in on myself and turned it into some judgment for myself of like other people were getting there earlier and warming up earlier and staying later and doing more bunheady things where it's like, I'll be here above and beyond, even though we've been here for 9 hours, you know? So I kind of, I don't know how much of this was just my own story or how much of it was really, I don't think that it was expressed to me explicitly, maybe in some ways and sometimes, but I felt like maybe I was being judged as not as committed, even though I felt more driven than ever. Because one, also when I became a single mom, but even before I became a single mom, like I didn't have a support system. It was me doing everything. Like anyone who's a mom and dances, most of the people that I know do have somewhat of a support system. And even within that, Karina Gonzalez is one who has told me, I don't know how you did that, because there's a whole life that you have to do before and after and during for someone else that has nothing to do with ballet. And then you get there and you still have to show up with the same focus and intensity and dedication, and even more if you're a principal, like you're an example. And so I think that for a long time I felt like I was falling short of people's expectations and being judged. But now I can say that maybe a lot of that was just me setting a standard for myself that I couldn't understand how to achieve anymore. Not necessarily in my dancing or in my like focus and desire to do my best, but in the amount of all that additional time dancers spend preparing their bodies and doing things. To be just frank, like especially when my son was younger, any second that I wasn't very much needing to be in that room in that moment, I was going to go bloop and shift over to that, whether it's a phone call to a teacher, driving to see him, whatever. I wasn't going to give any more than I had to. And that doesn't mean I didn't give a lot, but that was hard. That was like a hard kind of shift for me, because I'll tell you why. Before I had him, I can give you an example of like the kind of crazy dancer I was. Even before I came to Houston, I would do all my classes, do all my rehearsals, and ask if I could just stay until the last class. So we would finish up, everyone would go home, and I would go across the studio to like the jazz studio that was renting from us, because they were the only place still open because our classes ended, and I would go into their class and take a jazz class until the studio closed. Like I was going to be until nobody was there anymore. And that was me. And that still is me. But I think this like split of focus kind of made me question, do people see me as less now or less focused? And I think the answer is probably yes, but it was more complicated than that.
That totally makes sense. I talk a lot with dancers I work with about the idea of defining what you want your purpose or intention to be behind each performance. Obviously, you can carry the same purpose or intention for your whole career if you want to, or it can be unique to the performance and where you're at in that moment. Because if we don't examine our intention or purpose behind what we're doing, sometimes our brain will just choose whatever priority or purpose seems to be what goes with the flow, what we see modeled for us, what's right in front of us. And it might be, I do this to prove myself. I do this to be perfect. I do this for praise or whatever. And so I'd love to hear what your recent purpose has been behind your performances.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think I definitely lost my own purpose at some point in there, and that did not feel good to me. And I think guidance is really important, and feedback is really, really important, because it's hard to see ourselves clearly without a mirror, but at some point and this is kind of related to what I was just saying about when I thought that maybe I was disappointing people. I think that my purpose felt like it was to meet their expectations. Like the purpose for me being there was to prove, like you just said, prove myself, prove that I still deserve to be here, prove that even though now I've got these split focuses, that I still am good enough, or that I still love it enough, or whatever. And that didn't work very well for me. And I actually, like, my light went out for dance for a little bit of time. And I was like, I don't even know why I do this, or like what, like it was dark. It was not a good time. And after that, I think that it was like a slow evolution to what my purpose has become, and just gets bigger and bigger all the time. And that's just that I actually think, for me, the value of dance, whether it's ballet or contemporary or any type of movement with our bodies when we're performing, I think the highest value is that when there's an audience watching, whatever we're leaving on that stage, if it's a story, if it's abstract and it's only movement and there's no music, but whatever you're bringing, the gift is that they're connecting to that in themselves.
Yeah.
And that is like magic. That's like real magic. And I think once I remembered that, I always had an awareness of that. Like I always had an awareness from the first time I ever was on stage dancing, that I was like sharing my energy with the audience, and that and I could feel their energy, and there's this like reciprocity going on. And I fell in love with that because it was a place where I felt seen, but seen in a way where I could express myself authentically for some reason. And so my purpose, after losing it, when I thought that it was about trying to prove something to people, it became about just like giving of like myself, like dedicating to every single role or ballet, like my most authentic work and like my hard work, and then getting on stage and sharing it with as much presence as possible, like being totally present in the moment, because I can feel that translate to the audience. And I know that that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it's giving them whatever that is, it's allowing that to like reverberate and touch that in them. And that's like why I think that's why art exists. Like period, whether it's dance or kind of art, because not everybody gets to have a job where it's like reaching in and like grabbing parts of other people that maybe they're not accessing all the time. Because maybe my job is on a computer, or maybe my job is like just more like I'm a worker or a service manager or whatever it is. So our jobs are really important and special, and they do connect people back to humanity, like back to their own humanity, back to our shared humanity.
Yes.
That's just become more and more clear to me. So that's my purpose, is like connecting back to my own humanity, and therefore sharing that with anyone who wants to go there with me.
That's so cool. What is absolutely incredible about getting to have this conversation with you and hearing you verbalize your purpose is I can tell you, as someone who has watched you dance, that intention comes through very clearly. And whether dancers listening are a principal dancer or you dance for fun, the beauty of intention is that though, yes, technique gives you more optionality for how you translate that purpose through your body. However, perfect technique and a really high status in the ballet world isn't required to share a powerful intention like that. And I've even had people watch my performances and I don't even really dance seriously anymore. My technique isn't like half of what it used to be, but I've gotten so honed in on the power of intention that I've had experiences where people come up to me afterwards and they specifically verbalize to me exactly what my intention was. And they have no idea that that is what I decided for myself before I went to the theater that day.
Yeah.
It's a look, it works. And it's so
Yeah.
beautiful. I mean, I was just talking earlier about how I can feel the humanity that you bring into your dancing. So I
And
love it. I love it.
that's magic. And
Yeah.
like, I really think it is. And you know what? I don't want to like poo-poo on dancers who I know a few principal dancers that I've like come up with who are very much about technique and the discipline and the repetition and like the lines and all of that stuff, that because that's a part of being human too, right? A dedication and a discipline to anything is another piece. So it's
Yeah.
not to say that aesthetic
I do the same thing.
that like beauty for the sake of beauty, when you just look at something and it's got so much of a disciplined hand or body that you're just like, wow, that's unattainable for most people, right?
Yeah.
And that is a value of ballet. It's not to say that that's not valuable.
Yeah.
But there's a but that in ballet that can cross over into perfectionism to the point to where now you're excluding people. And when you start excluding people and creating like a superiority complex of like, and that's the only thing that's good enough. That's the only beautiful. That's the only way, is if it's perfect. Then you exclude humanity. You exclude the people who are watching, because that's going to speak to some people in some ways for what they need. But that's where diversity comes in, and where you need to have people who look a different way, people whose bodies move a different way, that's shaped a different way. Like, there's so much value in that, because when you look at the intention of art, of course you need that. And so ballet, I fight against that, because ballet really does say, but this is the best and this is the standard. And it gets really black and white, and I think ballet does itself a disservice doing that. It doesn't mean that you don't train to attain like your absolute best lines, your absolute like top technique and precision and musicality and turnout and all the things that everybody like strives for their best. But when you start excluding people from that and telling people that they're not good enough based on just who they are, that's where I go, I don't know. I can't get behind. I don't think that that's representing. You want to build a bigger audience in ballet. You want everybody to love ballet. You have to let everybody do ballet.
Preach. Yes. Yeah, that makes so much sense, how that perfectionism and excellence is going to tell one story. And it's kind of like why I cry at the Olympics. I didn't go to the Olympics. Actually, my housemate did. I'm very jealous.
Really?
Yes. Oh, the stories sounded amazing. But when I watch pure athletic excellence, and it is so awe-inspiring to see what is possible with the human body. And that does speak, it does tell a certain story, and it is inspiring. And like you said, it does matter. And some of us need to have that excellence and, mirrored back to us, so that, like you said earlier, that can light up within us and we can see what's possible for us. But that's just one story. It's one facet of the diamond.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be the whole story.
One of the sparkles. It's like, can't we be totally sparkly?
Right. Exactly. Man, there's so many questions I could ask you. This one does come to mind. Since you were in Houston Ballet for so long, And you've undoubtedly, well, you've gotten to see a change in directors. You have seen so many dancers come and go. What was it like to see so many dancers, not just go, but also all these new dancers come in over the years, and for you to, be there just, obviously doing your thing, growing, but you witnessed so much. So what was that like?
So I mean, it definitely like did not help with my abandonment issues to have to like, just like, I have this, I've been in therapy for forever, and I hope that I'll have the privilege of being in therapy for as long as I can be, because it's so helpful to have like safe reflection back to me, growth and intention setting, and just like having someone to walk with me where I can be totally vulnerable. I value it a lot. So I just totally lost my place. Hold on. Why were we, wait, ask the question
Oh, I
again.
was just asking what it was like to see the directors change and the company basically change so much over the years.
Thank you. So in therapy, I've sort of like identified some of my storylines that are like maybe based on trauma or painful experiences that aren't necessarily true, that I need to be able to see like, okay, like, so one of them is everyone leaves, right? And so
I have had that one.
So being in a company where everyone does leave, not helping the storyline. So I mean, that's funny and sad at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is hard. It is hard to like form these bonds and then have everyone, there's a lot of turnover in ballet, and definitely in Houston Ballet, there's a ton of turnover, like cyclically. But having like the newbies come in, I feel like the funny story I can tell you about that, and anyone that's there now will be able to tell you, and people who've been there in the past, that I like started being terrible about learning new names. Probably like it got really bad in the past like 10 years, like whole decade.
Wow.
But okay, in my defense, being a principal dancer for like such a long time, I wasn't in the room when their names were being said a lot, right? So like they're doing calls that are the group sections or in the core or whatever, where it's going to be like, you're going to hear their name all those first weeks and identify that's that person's name. And when I'm in class with them every day, but nobody's saying their name in class.
No one has a name tag.
No one has a name tag. So like seasons would go by.
Oh my gosh.
And then it turned into a game. And I think probably the person whose favorite game this was might be, there's a guy in the company named Riley. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
And he like come up to me and be like, what's that person's name? Paul, and he would just like die laughing, like it's not it at all.
Oh my gosh.
Also, in my defense, I feel like names have gotten harder and like more and more unique. Like in the last couple of years, I finally started making like a concerted effort. I was like, I have to learn people's names. So I would be like, okay, quiz me and like let me like help me with this. And I'd be like, that's his name, or that's her name. How am I supposed to find an association for that? I've never heard that name before. I didn't, so it got hard.
That's so funny.
My last year at HB, I knew everybody's name. I'm like, yeah, I knew everybody's name. But that sounds terrible because it sounds like so removed, but it wasn't intentional.
I'm sure it's not because you don't care.
It's not because I don't care, but it's not good.
It makes sense. Have you noticed a difference in more recent generations of dancers? Maybe in their artistry, skill level, mentality?
I feel like I have conversations within like my own kind of generation about this a lot, because a lot of people my age are teaching and directing and coaching. And it seems like in like more recent generations, there's definitely an increase in athletic and technical ability where like the standards are raised of jumps and how high your leg can go. And that's wonderful. I mean, it's like exciting, but it seems like maybe, I don't know if it's the training or that there's like competition mindset more now. There's like these big competitions that aren't just like, there used to be a couple, but now like people grow up doing competitions all the time. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to
Seriously.
go to IBC when I'm between this age and this age. And, you know, like it used to be more like that. So there seems to be like a huge emphasis on tricks and things, what I would call tricks, actually, because
Mhm.
technique is not just tricks. You know, technique is so many things within it. So there's a lot of focus on tricks in it, and it seems to take away from some of the nuance of even like the precision of like musicality and footwork and like
Mm.
when I was coming up, like the quality of every transition and how that is like where like that's what sets a dancer apart, you know, from like being able to just like whip out a bunch of tricks, but then like what is the whole seam from beginning to end and what's the
Yeah.
quality of that? And A Palma has like kind of been hijacked and gone missing a lot. And I'm like, do we not need
No, that's the best
more?
part.
I know.
I
Uh,
have nothing but a Palma.
yes, A Palma is my jam as well. I mean, it's so beautiful. So there's like some aspects that seem to have suffered from maybe some of the other focuses. And then the artistry piece is interesting because there's like a flashiness that seems to be more accessible to everyone, like a performance quality that like I'm like showing up and putting on. But when you get into the nuance again, it's like the nuance is lacking of like how much time you're spending building characters. What are those characters saying? What's your inner dialogue? Like that doesn't seem to be all as valued. Like values that used to be kind of held all at the same time feel like
Yes.
people come in and some of them are just
Mm.
almost completely missing.
I can see that. I've even noticed actually just now when you did this thing, I
Those are my
noticed.
feet, by the way.
Oh, don't worry. I know.
Yeah,
These are feet.
feet.
So I noticed that teachers I've had who are from, when I say older generation, I don't mean like you're old, but I think you know what I mean. Established.
Sure.
Old shouldn't be a bad word anyway. But
I am
anyway,
older than many people. I'm fine with it.
yes. Okay,
No,
thank you.
we're not hiding.
Cool. I love that. I want to be one of those women who's like, I'm 85 and I still celebrate my birthday.
Yes.
But anyway, so I did notice that in older teachers I've had, even when they teach, they're like, do this, do this. And then the new ones are like, do this. Their body language is like this.
Ah,
Crazy. Okay,
yeah.
that's just my little
No,
lived
I
experience,
mean,
but it's a thing.
and then you do have like I'm thinking about someone like choreographers, right? Like Annabelle is a friend of mine too, but Annabelle Lopez Ochoa.
Mhm.
Think about Dwight and like his choreography and coaching. And I think of like, I mean, obviously classical choreographers too, but I think of these like newer wave choreographers that are bridging between
Yes.
ballet and contemporary ballet. And they're both, right? You've got to
Mm.
get in there, you've got to do this, but you also have to
You
do
have to bring this,
and it's
this, and this.
yes. And
I
like
can't wait for people to listen to this on podcasts and have no idea what's
we
going
have
on.
just like a silent version where all we're doing is like just
Well,
without
podcast people, you have to go watch this on YouTube. Anyway, so I do know you've got another Zoom call to get on to. So I do want to see if we could wrap up by addressing this. Okay, I would love to hear if there's something in ballet culture right now that you think is not being talked about enough.
Well, we already just talked about it a lot. I mean, my top two are ageism and just body dysmorphia. That I think that those two things are very have a lot of like cognitive dissonance built into the culture.
Yes.
Meaning we are not critically thinking about these stereotypes that carry so much weight. And both of them are unhealthy in different ways, but the body dysmorphia piece and is very, I think it is still, people are talking about it, but so that's not really, that doesn't like go along with what you're saying, but people are talking about it, but I don't think that it is changing in the way that it really needs to, because I think a lot of teachers and, like I said, gatekeepers in like big classical companies, it's like we hear that, but this is ballet and this is the ballet aesthetic.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be what it is. So I don't know that it's being taken seriously enough. And some real stubbornness around it. And it hasn't really changed as much as people are giving it lip service to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that one, I think that let's say this, because this is actually less talked about. We started with it. So like agency and autonomy for ballet dancers is really stripped away and even villainized at a young age. Having a voice, saying no, saying makes me uncomfortable, that hurts. Actually, now I'm in so much pain that I can't really run that right now. And that's not laziness. That's listening to your body. So there is like a forced disconnect from our embodiment, our body's wisdom and language that needs to be addressed, and that needs to be talked about, and that cannot be a part of training of children anymore, and that needs to be gotten rid of in our culture, because it leads to abuse in a lot of ways. It leads to injury that is totally preventable. It leads to trauma. I mean, that piece, whatever that piece is, that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I would love to do a second episode with you just on the topic of agency, how it can be incorporated more and encouraged by leadership in ballet, and also even in the midst of environments that don't encourage it or actively suppress it. How do we start to tap into that for ourselves?
I would love to have that
conversation. Yay! I want to go there. And I think the episode will be approximately 3 hours long. We'll see. We'll see. So super rapid fire. What's next for you? I almost said more, but I'm going to cut myself off. What's next for you?
So I'm dancing with Vitacca Ballet, and that's really fun. It's a creation-based contemporary ballet company here in Houston. So we are working today. We started working with Aszure Barton. I've worked with her sister Aszure in Houston Ballet, so now I get to work with Aszure, and it's already awesome. I'm doing a piece also. The first piece I'll do with them is from Garret Smith, which is that he's their resident choreographer. He used to be a former colleague of mine at Ballet. So it feels like I'm having a lot of like really cool kind of reunions plus first experiences in this company. I filmed a TV show that's going to be on Prime TV, and I can't totally say what it is yet. I was brought in late, so it might be like a, oh, there's Melody thing if my scenes didn't get cut. Yeah, but I will I'll maybe like post about that or like say something about that when they've got a date for release. But it's a big show about dance, and it was really fun.
Yeah. Amazing. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to continue to follow along in this big next chapter for you. I'm such a fan. I'm even more of a fan of yours after this conversation. And I really, really appreciate just how real and open and big-hearted you are. So thank you for sharing all that with us.
Thank you, Kristen.
My pleasure. Okay, go get on your other Zoom call. Everyone else, thank you for watching and listening. And Melody, we'll reconnect for part 2.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.